The morning sun cast a fragile glow over the crumbling streets of a struggling neighborhood. Ryan Collins pedaled his beat-up bike, the rusty chain rattling with every turn. His sneakers, held together by duct tape, slapped against the pedals as he raced past boarded-up storefronts and graffiti-covered walls. Every corner whispered the same question. How much longer can we keep going like this? At home, his mother, Mary, sat hunched over a pile of overdue bills, her face lined with exhaustion. The eviction notice taped to the fridge was more than just a piece of paper. It was a ticking clock. Ryan had learned long ago that dreaming was a luxury they couldn't afford. His days were a cycle of school, work, and survival. But deep down, he wondered, is this all there is? Then, out of nowhere, a stranger appeared. A broken car. A plea for help. Ryan didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would set into motion a chain of events that could change everything. But is kindness enough to rewrite a life? Can one moment of opportunity outweigh years of struggle? Ryan was about to find out, and the answers might surprise everyone, including himself. But before we go looking for the answer, tell us where you're watching from and what the weather is like there. It would be wonderful to watch together with your loved ones and your small family. If possible, prepare a warm hot toddy before we dive into today's story. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to give us the motivation to bring you even more interesting stories. Thank you so much. Now, let's get started. The morning sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds of a small, cluttered apartment, casting faint shadows on peeling wallpaper. Ryan Collins, a wiry 16 years old with dark circles under his hazel eyes, tugged on his worn sneakers, careful not to pull too hard on the duct tape holding them together. His mother, Mary, was already at the kitchen counter, poring over a pile of overdue bills that had become a permanent fixture in their home. Ryan glanced at her, noting the exhaustion etched into her face. A face that once beamed with joy but now reflected the weight of relentless struggle. Ryan, don't forget to pick up extra napkins on your way to the diner, Mary reminded him without looking up, her voice tired yet firm. I'll get them, Ryan replied, shoving a notebook into his frayed backpack. He didn't have the heart to tell her they were out of cash for the week, the last few dollars spent on groceries. Instead, he hoped the diner's supplier might be lenient just one more time. The Collins family had been hit hard in recent years. After Ryan's father walked out, leaving nothing but a pile of debt, Mary took on double shifts at the diner. Ryan, determined to ease her burden, spent his evenings wiping tables, refilling coffee cups, and handling the odd jobs no one else wanted. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. The walk to the diner was familiar, past the graffiti-covered walls of a closed convenience store, through a park littered with autumn leaves, and over the cracked sidewalks of their neighborhood. Ryan tried to ignore the eviction notice taped to their apartment door that morning. Its bold, red letters loomed in his mind, a constant reminder that their time was running out. Ryan arrived at the diner to the clang of the doorbell overhead, announcing his presence to the nearly empty room. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a dull glow over the linoleum floor. Mary was behind the counter, balancing receipts while stealing sips from a cold cup of coffee. She looked up briefly as Ryan entered. "You're late," she said, her voice sharp but devoid of malice. "Sorry, Mom," Ryan muttered, tossing his backpack into the supply closet and grabbing an apron from the hook. He immediately went to work, grabbing a dishcloth and heading to the tables. The diner's regulars included an older couple who spent their afternoons nursing coffee in the corner booth and the occasional truck driver grabbing a meal on the go. Business had been slow for weeks, and the empty seats told the story of a struggling establishment. Ryan moved methodically, wiping tables, refilling salt shakers, and replacing ketchup bottles. His hands, rough and calloused from years of labor, worked with quiet efficiency. "Table 3 needs water," Mary called out from behind the counter. Ryan grabbed a pitcher and approached the booth. The elderly woman sitting there offered him a faint smile. "Thank you, young man," she said, her voice soft. Ryan nodded politely, pouring their water. He didn't linger. There was too much to do and too little time. After the lunch rush, Ryan took a rare moment to lean against the counter and catch his breath. He glanced at the clock, knowing he'd have to leave soon to make it to school on time. School was a different kind of battlefield. His second-hand clothes and taped-up shoes made him a target for cruel jokes, but Ryan had learned to keep his head down and endure it. He had no time for self-pity. "Eat something," Mary said, sliding a plate of leftover fries toward him. "You're too skinny." "I'm fine," Ryan replied, pushing the plate away. He wasn't, but admitting that wouldn't help. Mary sighed. But before she could argue, the bell above the door jingled again. Ryan turned to see a man step inside. He was older, with neatly combed silver hair and an expensive-looking coat that stood out against the diner's worn interior. His polished shoes clicked softly on the floor as he made his way to the counter. Ryan exchanged a glance with Mary, who shrugged. "Lost, maybe," she whispered. Ryan grabbed a notepad and approached the man. "Can I get you something, sir?" The man looked up, his face lined with age but his gaze sharp. "Just coffee. Black." Ryan poured the coffee and set it in front of him, noting the slight tremble in the man's hands as he reached for the cup. "You okay, sir?" Ryan asked, his voice low. The man offered a faint smile. "Rough day." Ryan didn't press further. Instead, he returned to his tasks, though he couldn't help but glance at the man from time to time. Something about him seemed out of place, as though he carried a weight no one else could see. That night, after locking up the diner, Ryan pedaled home on his rusted bike. The cold wind bit at his face, and his thin jacket did little to keep it out. When he reached their apartment, he found Mary sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills. Ryan didn't say anything as he dropped his backpack and collapsed onto the couch. "We'll figure it out," Mary said, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. Ryan nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed her. The eviction notice sat crumpled in his pocket, a silent reminder of how close they were to losing everything. Yet, as he stared at the cracked ceiling above him, Ryan made a quiet vow. No matter how hard things got, he wouldn't give up. Not on his mother, and not on their home. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the cracked sidewalks as Ryan pedaled his rickety bike home from school. The worn-out chain rattled with every turn of the wheels, a sound that Ryan had long since tuned out. His mind was elsewhere, on the eviction notice crumpled in his pocket, on the pile of bills waiting at home, and on his mother's tired face that seemed etched into his memory. Ryan was lost in thought when he saw it. An old sedan pulled over on the side of the road, steam hissing from beneath its hood. The vehicle was parked at an awkward angle, and a man in a dark coat paced nervously nearby, a cell phone pressed to his ear. Ryan slowed down, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the man from the diner the day before. It was the stranger who had ordered black coffee and seemed weighed down by more than just a bad day. Ryan hesitated. He had no obligation to stop. The last thing he needed was to make his evening more complicated. But something about the man's uneasy movements tugged at him. He could have kept riding, but that wasn't who he was. He braked, the squeal of his bike's rusty wheels breaking the silence. "Need help?" he called out. The man turned abruptly, lowering his phone. His face was lined with frustration, but his expression softened when he saw Ryan. "I think it's the engine," he said, gesturing toward the car. "I've been trying to get a tow truck, but no one's answering." Ryan dismounted his bike and leaned it against a nearby tree. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, walking toward the car. The man raised an eyebrow, skepticism flashing across his face. "Do you know anything about cars?" "Not much," Ryan admitted, rolling up his sleeves, "but I can try." The man stepped aside, and Ryan opened the hood, wincing at the wave of heat that hit him. He stared at the tangle of pipes and wires, his mind racing. He wasn't a mechanic, but he'd spent enough time helping his uncle with his old truck to have a basic idea of what to look for. He checked the hoses, inspecting for anything out of place. After a few minutes, Ryan spotted the problem. "It's the radiator," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "There's a leak." The man frowned. "Can you fix it?" Ryan thought for a moment. He didn't have tools or parts, but his uncle had once told him that a quick patch job could hold long enough to get to a repair shop. "Maybe," he said. "Do you have duct tape?" The man blinked at him in surprise. "Duct tape?" Ryan shrugged. "It's not a permanent fix, but it might get you to a garage." The man rummaged through his trunk, eventually pulling out a roll of duct tape. Ryan took it and carefully wrapped the damaged hose, securing it tightly. His hands moved quickly, his years of handling odd jobs making him resourceful even in unfamiliar situations. "Try it now," Ryan said, stepping back and wiping the sweat from his brow. The man climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and held his breath. The engine sputtered for a moment before roaring to life. Ryan grinned, a small sense of accomplishment swelling in his chest. "That should hold for a few miles at least," he said. The man got out of the car, his expression a mix of relief and amazement. "You just saved me a tow," he said, shaking his head. "Thank you." "Not a problem," Ryan replied, brushing off his hands. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." Ryan shook his head quickly. "Don't worry about it," he said, stepping back. "I'm just glad I could help." The man hesitated, his brow furrowed as he studied Ryan. "You're sure?" "Positive," Ryan said firmly. For a moment, the man said nothing, as if trying to decide whether to insist. Then he extended his hand. "Harrison," he said. "William Preston." Ryan wiped his hands on his jeans before shaking it. "Ryan," he replied. William smiled, a faint warmth breaking through the exhaustion in his eyes. "Ryan, you've got a good heart. Not many people would stop to help a stranger, let alone fix their car." Ryan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's no big deal." "Maybe not to you," William said, "but it is to me." Ryan nodded, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to being thanked like this. As he mounted his bike and prepared to leave, William called after him. "If you ever need anything, Ryan, don't hesitate to ask." Ryan gave a small wave and pedaled away, the cold evening air biting at his cheeks. He felt a strange mix of pride and uncertainty. For once, he'd been able to fix something, to make someone's day a little easier. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going as he rode home to face the challenges waiting for him. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, Ryan replayed the encounter in his mind. He didn't know it yet, but meeting William Preston was about to change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. The diner hummed with its usual morning rhythm. The sizzle of bacon on the griddle, the clink of cups against saucers, and the faint chatter of Cuz William heirs seated in worn booths. Ryan arrived early, tying on his faded apron as his mother, Mary, stood behind the counter, balancing receipts and sipping her first cup of coffee for the day. "You're here on time for once," Mary said, a teasing smile softening the lines of exhaustion on her face. "Figured I'd try something new," Ryan replied with a shrug, grabbing a dishcloth to start wiping down tables. Business was slow, as it often was on weekday mornings. A couple of regulars sat at their usual booth, flipping through newspapers, while a truck driver sipped his coffee at the counter. Ryan moved between tables, refilling water glasses and picking up stray napkins, his mind still lingering on the previous evening. The encounter with William Preston replayed in his head, his hands still faintly sticky from the duct tape he'd used to patch the radiator. The morning passed uneventfully until the bell above the door jingled. Ryan glanced up, expecting to see another regular, but froze mid-step. It was him, William Preston. Today, the man looked more put together, his dark coat replaced by a neatly pressed suit, and his polished shoes gleaming under the diner's fluorescent lights. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't often find himself in places like this. William scanned the room until his eyes landed on Ryan. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he approached the counter. Ryan, suddenly self-conscious, fumbled with the cloth in his hands. "Ryan," William greeted warmly, taking a seat at the counter. "Didn't think I'd find you here." Ryan straightened up, his voice uncertain. Yeah, I work here most days. What brings you back?" William gestured for a coffee as Mary approached, eyeing the man with suspicion. She poured the cup without a word, her brows furrowed. "Just wanted to thank you again for yesterday," William said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Not many people would have stopped to help, let alone a kid your age." "It wasn't a big deal," Ryan said quickly, glancing at his mom, who was now openly listening to their conversation. "Oh, I'd say it was," William countered. "That patch job got me home safely, and for that, I'm grateful." Mary cleared her throat, setting the coffee pot down with more force than necessary. Ryan's always helping people. It's just how he is. William chuckled, his eyes flickering with interest as he watched Ryan wipe down a nearby table. I can see that, he said. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? Ryan stopped mid-wipe, unsure how to respond. William turned his attention back to Mary. Your son has potential. He could go far with the right opportunities. Mary crossed her arms, her expression guarded. Opportunities aren't exactly easy to come by around here. That's why I'm here, William said, leaning forward slightly. Ryan, I own a car dealership in town, luxury vehicles. I've been in the business for years. Watching you work last night, I saw something rare. You've got a natural instinct for fixing things, for figuring out problems on the fly. That's not something you see every day. Ryan blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. I just did what I could, he mumbled. William smiled. And that's exactly why I want to offer you something. A part-time job at my dealership. The diner seemed to fall silent, the hum of conversation fading as Mary's sharp gaze landed on William. A job? She repeated, her tone laced with skepticism. Nothing fancy at first, William explained. Washing cars, tidying up, maybe running errands. But I can promise you this. If you're willing to work hard, I'll make sure it leads somewhere. I'll even help you enroll in a technical training program. With the right skills, you could turn that knack of yours into a real career. Ryan stared at him, his mind racing. It sounded too good to be true. He glanced at his mom, who was already shaking her head. We don't take handouts, Mary said firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. It's not charity, William replied calmly. It's an opportunity. There's a difference. Mary folded her arms tighter, her jaw set. Opportunities like this usually come with strings attached. Mom, Ryan started, but Mary cut him off with a raised hand. I've heard promises like this before, Mr. Harrison. They don't usually work out for people like us. William held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I get it. I wouldn't trust a stranger either. But I'm not here to make promises. I'm here to give Ryan a chance. All I'm asking is for him to come by the dealership and see for himself. No commitments. Just take a look. Mary hesitated, her eyes flickering to Ryan, who was looking at her with a mixture of hope and frustration. After a long moment, she exhaled sharply. Fine. One visit. That's it. William nodded, his smile returning. That's all I ask. He finished his coffee, placed a few bills on the counter, and stood. Think about it, Ryan, he said, his tone warm and genuine. You've got more potential than you realize. Don't let it go to waste. As the door jingled shut behind him, Ryan turned to his mother. Mom. We'll talk about it later, Mary said, cutting him off. Her voice was softer now, but the tension in her shoulders hadn't eased. Ryan nodded, swallowing the knot of emotions in his throat. As he went back to wiping tables, his mind raced with the possibilities William had laid out before him. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't dared to in years, hope. The Collins apartment was dimly lit, the lone kitchen bulb casting a faint yellow glow over the cramped space. The dinner table, a mismatched relic from a thrift store, was covered in a stack of unpaid bills, a reminder of the relentless financial burden they carried. Mary sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea, her brow furrowed as she stared at the eviction notice taped to the fridge. Ryan stood across the room, leaning against the counter. He had spent the last hour mustering the courage to bring up William Preston's offer again. His mom hadn't said much after the diner conversation, but her silence had been heavy, filled with unspoken doubts and fears. Ryan couldn't let this opportunity slip away, not when it felt like the first real chance they'd had in years. Mom, Ryan started, his voice hesitant. Mary didn't look up. What is it? I want to talk about Mr. Harrison's offer. At that, Mary's eyes lifted from her tea, narrowing slightly. I thought I made it clear at the diner. We don't know this man, Ryan. People like him don't just show up offering help for free. Ryan pushed off the counter, his frustration bubbling to the surface. It's not about charity, Mom. He said it himself. It's an opportunity. Mary set her mug down, crossing her arms. Opportunities like this don't come without strings. What happens if he turns around and asks for something we can't give? What happens if it's too good to be true? Ryan took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. What if it's not? What if this is the one chance we have to get out of this mess? Mary's jaw tightened, her eyes clouded with worry. Ryan, I've lived long enough to know that people like us don't get handouts without consequences. I can't let you get your hopes up only to have them crushed. It's not about handouts. Ryan's voice rose, and he immediately regretted it. He softened his tone, stepping closer to the table. Mom, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's something. Washing cars, running errands, it's work I can handle. And if it leads to learning a trade, why not try? Mary rubbed her temples, her expression torn. Ryan, I'm just scared. I don't want you to get hurt. You've already had to grow up too fast. I don't want you to carry even more disappointment. Her words hit Ryan harder than he expected. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his elbows resting on the table. Mom, I know you're scared. I am too. But we can't keep going like this. You're working yourself to the bone, and it's still not enough. I need to do something more. Mary stared at him for a long moment, her gaze softening. You're a good kid, Ryan. Better than I deserve. Don't say that, Ryan replied quickly. You're doing everything you can. I want to help. Silence hung between them, heavy but not hostile. Finally, Mary sighed, leaning back in her chair. What exactly is he offering? Ryan perked up, sensing a shift in her stance. He owns a car dealership, fancy cars, apparently. He said I could start with simple stuff, like cleaning and errands, but he'd help me get into technical school. He thinks I have potential. Mary frowned. And you believe him? Ryan hesitated. I don't know, but he seemed genuine, Mom, and I'd rather try and fail than wonder what could have been. Mary's fingers drummed against the table as she mulled it over. Fine, she said at last, her voice reluctant. But if something feels off, anything, you walk away. Promise me that. I promise, Ryan said immediately, relief washing over him. Thank you. Mary nodded, though her worry was still etched in her face. We'll see how it goes. The next morning, Ryan woke earlier than usual, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. He scarfed down a piece of toast and threw on his cleanest pair of jeans and a plain t-shirt. Mary sat at the table with her usual cup of tea, watching him with a mix of pride and apprehension. You sure about this? She asked as Ryan slung his backpack over one shoulder. No, Ryan admitted, his hand on the doorknob, but I have to try. Mary nodded, her face softening. Be careful, Ryan. I will, he promised before stepping out the door. The first day at the dealership began early. Ryan rode his bike to the sleek, modern building, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. The sun was still rising, casting long shadows over the rows of gleaming luxury cars parked out front. Ryan chained his bike to a post near the employee entrance and paused, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The moment he walked through the doors, Ryan felt out of place. The polished floors gleamed like mirrors, and the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Employees dressed in crisp shirts and tailored pants moved efficiently through the showroom, their polished shoes clicking against the tiles. Ryan adjusted his plain t-shirt and glanced down at his duct-taped sneakers, suddenly feeling small. Ryan. William's voice broke through his thoughts. Ryan looked up to see William Preston striding toward him, his usual confident smile in place. Glad you're here, William said, clapping a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Let me show you the ropes. William led Ryan to the back of the dealership, away from the pristine showroom and into a workroom filled with cleaning supplies, tools, and spare parts. The air here smelled of motor oil and cleaning chemicals, a scent Ryan found oddly comforting. This is where you'll start, William explained. Nothing fancy, just cleaning cars, tidying up, and lending a hand wherever you're needed. Prove yourself here, and we'll talk about moving you up. Ryan nodded, his determination outweighing his nervousness. I can do that. William smiled. I know you can. Let me introduce you to a few people. Ryan was quickly introduced to a handful of employees, most of whom gave him polite smiles but seemed distracted by their own tasks. One man, however, stood out. Jason, a tall, broad-shouldered employee in his late 20s, eyed Ryan skeptically as William introduced them. "This is Jason," William said. "He's one of our senior team members." "Jason, this is Ryan, our newest team member." Jason crossed his arms, his smirk barely hidden. "New, huh? Don't take it personally if the first week feels like boot camp. Not everyone's cut out for this." Ryan forced a polite smile. "I'll do my best." "We'll see," Jason said, his tone dismissive. "Good luck, kid." William frowned but didn't comment, instead leading Ryan to his first task, cleaning a sleek black sedan parked in the back lot. Ryan grabbed a bucket of soapy water and a sponge, his nerves replaced by focus as he set to work. The car gleamed under the morning sun, and Ryan made sure every inch was spotless, scrubbing the wheels and polishing the windows until they shone. By lunchtime, Ryan had cleaned 3 cars, and his arms ached from the effort. He sat on the edge of a curb, sipping water from a bottle William had handed him earlier. As he wiped sweat from his brow, Jason walked by, his smirk still firmly in place. "Not bad, kid," Jason said, leaning against a nearby car. "But let's see how long you last. Most newbies quit when they realize this isn't as easy as it looks." Ryan bit back a retort, refusing to let Jason's words get to him. "Guess we'll find out," he said evenly, returning to his work. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Ryan moved cars, wiped down dashboards, and swept the garage floor, his determination never wavering despite the physical strain. He noticed Jason watching him from time to time, his expression unreadable. That evening, Ryan rode home feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and pride. His hands were blistered, and his back ached, but he couldn't shake the sense of accomplishment. He had made it through his first day, and while it hadn't been easy, he knew it was just the beginning. The next few days at the dealership were equally challenging. Ryan quickly learned that the work required more than just physical effort. It demanded focus, attention to detail, and the ability to handle criticism. Jason seemed to take every opportunity to test him, pointing out minor mistakes and making snide comments about his lack of experience. "You missed a spot," Jason said one afternoon, gesturing to a streak on a car window Ryan had just cleaned. Ryan gritted his teeth, wiping the streak away without a word. He refused to give Jason the satisfaction of seeing him frustrated. Despite the challenges, Ryan found moments of encouragement. William checked in regularly, offering words of support and occasional advice. "Don't let Jason get to you," William said one day after noticing Ryan's tense expression. "He's tough on everyone, but he respects hard work." Ryan nodded, grateful for William's reassurance. He also found unexpected camaraderie with Hector, an experienced mechanic who worked in the garage. Hector was gruff but patient, showing Ryan how to handle simple tools and offering tips on cleaning the cars more efficiently. By the end of his first week, Ryan began to find his rhythm. The dealership was still an intimidating place, but he was starting to feel like he belonged, or at least like he had earned a spot there. On Friday, as he finished cleaning a convertible in the back lot, William approached him with an envelope. "Here," William said, handing it to Ryan. "Your first paycheck." Ryan stared at the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. He opened it to find an amount that, while modest, was more money than he had ever earned in a single week. His chest swelled with pride. "Thank you," Ryan said, his voice quiet. "You earned it," William replied. "Keep it up, and there'll be more where that came from." Ryan nodded, tucking the envelope into his pocket. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was taking control of his life, one step at a time. The morning sun crept over the sleek cars in the dealership's lot, casting long shadows as Ryan adjusted the strap of his backpack and stepped inside. It was his second week on the job, and while he'd started to find his rhythm, the place still felt intimidating. The showroom gleamed like a stage for wealth and success, two things Ryan had never known. But he reminded himself why he was here. He wasn't just cleaning cars. He was trying to change his life. As Ryan walked toward the back of the dealership, he passed Hector, the veteran mechanic who seemed to know every car inside and out. Hector was hunched over the hood of a silver SUV, his hands black with grease. Despite his gruff demeanor, Hector had been one of the few employees to show Ryan patience, offering tips and advice when he noticed Ryan struggling. "Hey, kid," Hector called out without looking up. "Got a minute?" Ryan stopped in his tracks, surprised. "Yeah, sure." Hector motioned him over. "I could use an extra pair of hands. This thing's giving me trouble." Ryan hesitated. He hadn't done anything more complicated than cleaning since he started. "I don't know much about fixing cars," he admitted. Hector smirked. "You've got hands, don't you? That's all you need to start. Now, grab that wrench." Under Hector's guidance, Ryan began assisting with small tasks, holding tools, tightening bolts, and cleaning parts as Hector explained what he was doing. The SUV had a faulty ignition coil, a concept that sounded foreign to Ryan at first. But as Hector broke it down step by step, Ryan found himself following along. "See this?" Hector pointed to a worn-out part under the hood. "This is your culprit. Ignition coil shot. Ever replaced one before?" Ryan shook his head. "No, but I'm willing to learn." "Good," Hector said, handing him a new coil and a socket wrench. "Then get to it." Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he worked, but Hector's calm instructions kept him focused. It took him longer than it would have taken Hector, but when the new coil was finally installed, Ryan stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. "Not bad," Hector said, inspecting the work. "A little slow, but you'll get faster. You've got a knack for this, kid." Ryan felt a swell of pride. For the first time, he wasn't just cleaning cars, he was fixing them. Later that afternoon, William stopped by the garage. His tailored suit looked out of place next to the grease-stained walls, but he moved with an easy confidence. "How's it going back here?" he asked, his gaze landing on Ryan. "Your new guy's not bad," Hector said, jerking a thumb toward Ryan. "He's green, but he picks things up quick." William's face lit up with interest. "Is that so?" He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the SUV Ryan had been working on. "Ryan, you helped with this?" Ryan nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "Hector showed me what to do." Hector grunted. The kid's being modest. He handled the replacement himself, just needed a bit of guidance. William's smile widened. "That's what I like to hear." He turned to Ryan. "How'd you like working on the cars instead of just cleaning them?" Ryan hesitated. "It's different. Feels like I'm actually doing something important." "You are," William said firmly. "And that's why I think it's time we take things a step further." Ryan blinked. "What do you mean?" "Training," William replied. "If you've got the talent, and Hector seems to think you do, you should be learning the trade properly. I can help you enroll in a technical school. You'd be working here part-time and studying part-time. What do you think?" Ryan stared at him, the words sinking in slowly. It was an opportunity he hadn't even dared to dream about. "You'd do that for me?" "I'd do it because you've earned it," William said. "But only if you're willing to put in the effort. This won't be easy." Ryan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He thought about his mom, the eviction notice, and the countless nights he'd spent wondering if things would ever get better. "I want to try," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll work as hard as I can." "That's what I like to hear," William said, clapping him on the back. "We'll get the paperwork started this week." As the days passed, Ryan's confidence grew. With Hector's guidance, he began tackling more complex repairs, from replacing brake pads to diagnosing engine issues. Each task felt like a small victory, a reminder that he was capable of more than he'd ever given himself credit for. At home, Ryan shared the news about the technical school with his mom. Mary was hesitant at first, her usual skepticism kicking in. "And what happens if it doesn't work out?" she asked one evening, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Ryan looked at her, his determination unwavering. "It will, Mom. I'm not giving up this time." Mary sighed, her expression softening. "I just don't want you to get hurt, Ryan. But if this is what you want, I'll support you." "Thanks, Mom," Ryan said, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. By the end of his third week at the dealership, Ryan no longer felt like an outsider. He still had a long way to go, but each day brought a new challenge and a new lesson. He began to see a future he'd never imagined for himself, a future where he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. As he walked home that evening, the crisp air biting at his cheeks, Ryan couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. And this time, he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. Ryan's days began earlier and ended later than ever before. Mornings were spent at the dealership, cleaning cars and assisting Hector with repairs. Afternoons blurred into evenings filled with lectures and hands-on workshops at the technical school. And when he finally returned home, there were dishes to wash, bills to organize, and homework to complete. Life was relentless, but Ryan refused to let the weight of it crush him. He'd made a promise, to himself and to his mom, that he wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. One particular Monday morning at the dealership, Ryan arrived earlier than usual. The air was crisp, and dew clung to the cars in the lot. Hector was already in the garage, inspecting a car's undercarriage. Ryan grabbed a bucket and sponge, preparing to start his routine of washing vehicles. "Ryan," Jason's voice rang out from across the lot. Ryan turned to see his coworker striding toward him, a smirk plastered on his face. "You're really buying into all this, huh?" Jason teased, gesturing to the dealership. "Harrison's charity project?" Ryan gritted his teeth, but kept his focus on his work. "I'm just doing my job." Jason leaned against a nearby car, his tone turning mocking. "Sure, kid. Keep scrubbing. Let me know when you figure out that hard work doesn't mean a thing around here unless you've got connections." Ryan didn't respond. He learned quickly that engaging with Jason only fueled his taunts. Instead, he turned his attention to the car in front of him, scrubbing the hood until it gleamed. As Jason walked away, Hector appeared in the doorway of the garage. "Don't let him get to you, kid," he said gruffly. "Jason's all bark, no bite. He'll come around when you prove yourself." Ryan nodded, appreciating Hector's support, but proving himself felt like a mountain he was still climbing. By the time Ryan arrived at his evening class at the technical school, exhaustion had begun to set in. He slid into his usual seat at the back of the classroom, his notebook open and pen ready. The instructor, Mr. Griffin, launched into a lecture about diagnostic tools, his booming voice filling the room. Ryan struggled to focus, his eyelids heavy. His mind wandered back to the dealership and the endless tasks waiting for him, William Oro. But then Mr. Griffin called his name. "Ryan, what's the primary function of an OBD scanner?" Ryan blinked, caught off guard. The room fell silent as every student turned to look at him. His heart raced, but he forced himself to think. He'd read about this in the textbook last night. It's used to read error codes from the car's onboard computer," Ryan said finally. Mr. Griffin nodded, a small smile on his face. "Correct. Good work." The tension in Ryan's chest eased, and a faint sense of pride flickered inside him. It wasn't much, but it was a reminder that he was learning, growing, and taking steps toward something bigger. At home, the challenges didn't let up. Mary, though supportive in her way, was visibly worried. She noticed the dark circles under Ryan's eyes and the way his shoulders sagged when he walked through the door each night. "You're running yourself into the ground, Ryan," she said one evening as he sat at the kitchen table, flipping through his class notes. "I'm fine, Mom," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Mary placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not. You can't do everything." "I have to," Ryan said firmly, looking up at her. "This isn't just about me. It's about us. I'm trying to make things better." Mary sighed, her expression softening. "I know, Ryan. I just don't want to see you burn out." "I won't," Ryan promised, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was convincing her, or himself. Amid the exhaustion and doubts, small victories kept Ryan going. One afternoon at the dealership, William handed him his second paycheck. It was larger than the first, a result of Ryan's increased responsibilities. He stared at the amount, feeling a rush of pride. That evening, he handed it to his mom. "It's for the bills," he said simply. Mary's eyes softened as she took the envelope. "Thank you, Ryan. You're doing more than I ever expected." Ryan shrugged, but her words stayed with him. For once, he felt like he was making a difference. Another turning point came during a hands-on workshop at the technical school. The assignment was to diagnose and fix an engine issue under a strict time limit. Ryan's group faced a complex problem, a misfiring cylinder caused by a faulty spark plug. While the others hesitated, Ryan took the lead, recalling a similar issue he'd seen Hector handle. He methodically checked the spark plugs, replacing the damaged one and ensuring the connections were secure. When the engine roared back to life, Mr. Griffin gave Ryan an approving nod. "Well done, Ryan," he said. "You've got a good eye for this." Ryan's classmates offered small nods of respect, and for the first time, Ryan felt like he belonged, not just at the technical school, but in this new world he was building for himself. But not every day was smooth. The combination of work, school, and home responsibilities left Ryan drained. There were moments he doubted himself, wondering if he'd taken on too much. Jason's teasing, though less frequent, still stung, and Mary's cautious optimism weighed heavily on him. Yet, despite the struggles, Ryan refused to give up. Each small victory, whether it was a paycheck, praise from an instructor, or mastering a new skill, reminded him why he was pushing so hard. He wasn't just working toward a better future for himself. He was fighting for a life where his mom didn't have to struggle every day just to keep the lights on. As the week ended, Ryan sat in the garage, wiping grease from his hands after finishing another repair under Hector's guidance. The ache in his muscles was a constant reminder of how hard he was working, but the pride in his chest was just as real. "You're doing good, kid," Hector said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Keep this up, and you'll be running this place someday." Ryan smiled, the exhaustion in his eyes giving way to determination. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something real, and for the first time, he believed he could see it through. The dealership was bustling on a bright Saturday morning, with Cuz William Ayres strolling through the showroom and salespeople weaving between gleaming vehicles. Ryan had arrived early, as usual, to clean and prep cars for the day. He was wiping down the windows of a sleek convertible when William approached him with a clipboard in hand. "Ryan," William said, his tone serious yet warm, "I've got a job for you." Ryan straightened, setting his rag aside. "What's up?" "A premium client dropped off their car this morning," William explained. "It's one of our high-end SUVs, and it's making a grinding noise when turning. Hector is tied up with another job, and I need someone to take a look at it." William ASH tightened. "You want me to fix it?" William nodded. "I think you're ready. You've been learning fast, and Hector speaks highly of you. Besides, you've seen enough of these repairs by now to handle it." Ryan hesitated, his hands tightening into fists. This wasn't just any repair. It was for one of their top clients. If he messed up, the consequences could be huge. "Don't overthink it," William said, sensing Ryan's nerves. "Hector is around if you need help. I trust you." The words settled in Ryan's chest, steadying him. He nodded, determination replacing his doubt. "I'll do it." In the garage, the SUV stood out among the other cars, its sleek design and polished finish practically gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Ryan grabbed his tools and slid under the vehicle, his heart pounding. The noise was likely coming from the suspension or steering system, both of which he'd learned about in class and from Hector. Still, this was the first time he'd be tackling such a high-stakes job on his own. Jason wandered into the garage, his usual smirk firmly in place. "What's this?" he asked, crossing his arms as he leaned against a nearby workbench. "Harrison's letting you handle a premium job? Bold move." Ryan ignored him, focusing on his inspection. He didn't have time for Jason's taunts, not today. Jason chuckled. "Hope you don't screw it up, kid. The client's not exactly the forgiving type." Ryan gritted his teeth, but didn't respond. He couldn't afford to let Jason's words shake him. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, methodically checking the steering components, ball joints, and tie rods. After nearly an hour of careful inspection, he found the problem: a worn-out control arm bushing. "Gotcha," Ryan muttered under his breath. Hector appeared just as Ryan was preparing to replace the bushing. "How's it going?" the mechanic asked, his expression neutral. "I think it's the control arm bushing," Ryan said, showing him the worn part. Hector examined it and gave a small nod. "Good catch. You know what to do?" Ryan swallowed his nerves. "Yeah, I think so." "Then get to it," Hector said, stepping back to give Ryan space. With steady hands, Ryan removed the damaged bushing and replaced it with a new one, tightening everything to the proper specifications. It was painstaking work, but he stayed focused, double-checking every step. When he was done, he slid out from under the car and wiped the sweat from his brow. "All set," he said. Hector nodded, a hint of approval in his usually gruff expression. "Start it up. Let's see if you've got it." Ryan climbed into the driver's seat, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the key. The engine roared to life, and Ryan carefully turned the steering wheel. The grinding noise was gone. Relief flooded through him. "Nice work, kid," Hector said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You did good." By the time the SUV was returned to the client, word of Ryan's repair had spread through the dealership. Even Jason, who usually found something to criticize, offered a reluctant nod of acknowledgement as Ryan walked by. "Not bad, rookie," Jason said. "Guess you've got some skills after all." Ryan allowed himself a small smile. The respect he'd been working so hard to earn was finally starting to show. That afternoon, William called Ryan into his office. The room was modest but neat, with framed photos of cars and family lining the walls. William gestured for Ryan to sit, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to see me?" Ryan asked, his nerves creeping back. William leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "I heard about the SUV. Hector told me you handled it like a pro." Ryan shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just did what I've been taught." William smiled. "That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. Ryan, you've been with us for a few weeks now, and you've shown more dedication and talent than some of my full-time employees." Ryan blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I think it's time we make this official," William continued. "I'm offering you a formal apprenticeship. You'll still work part-time while attending school, but this means more hands-on training, bigger responsibilities, and a clearer path forward." Ryan stared at him, his mind racing. A formal apprenticeship? It was more than he'd dared to hope for. "Are you serious?" Ryan finally asked. "Completely," William said. "You've earned it." Ryan's chest swelled with pride. "Thank you. I won't let you down." William stood and extended his hand. "I know you won't." Ryan shook it firmly, a sense of purpose settling over him. This was the turning point he'd been working toward, the first real step toward a better future. That evening, Ryan shared the news with his mom. Mary's reaction was a mix of surprise and pride. "An apprenticeship?" she said, her voice soft. "Ryan, that's amazing." Ryan smiled, his excitement bubbling over. "It's a big deal, Mom. I can actually see a future in this." Mary nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Ryan. More than you know." Ryan felt a lump rise in his throat, but managed to keep his voice steady. "Thanks, Mom. This is just the beginning." As he lay in bed that night, Ryan thought about everything it had taken to get to this point. The long days, the doubts, the challenges. It had all been worth it. For the first time, he wasn't just dreaming about a better life. He was building it. Ryan adjusted the collar of his newly ironed shirt, standing outside the dealership as William's car rolled to a stop. The day of the William Otive conference had arrived, and Ryan's nerves buzzed with excitement and apprehension. It wasn't every day that he got to attend an event filled with industry professionals and cutting-edge innovations. This was far removed from the life he had known, a step into a world he barely dared to imagine. William stepped out of his sleek sedan, his usual calm confidence radiating through his sharp suit. "You ready, Ryan?" he asked with a grin. Ryan nodded, his hands fidgeting slightly. "I think so." "Good," William said, clapping him on the shoulder. "This is about more than just cars. It's about seeing the bigger picture. Keep your eyes open and your mind sharp." The drive to the city was quiet at first, the hum of the car's engine filling the silence. Ryan stared out the window, watching the skyline grow larger as they neared the convention center. His thoughts bounced between anticipation and self-doubt. Would he fit in? What could he possibly contribute among seasoned professionals? William must have sensed his tension. "You know, Ryan," he began, keeping his eyes on the road, "when I went to my first conference, I felt completely out of my depth. I was young, inexperienced, and convinced I didn't belong." "What changed?" Ryan asked, surprised. "I realized that everyone starts somewhere," William replied. "It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about learning, listening, and figuring out where you want to go. Ryan nodded, William's words settling his nerves, if only slightly. The convention center was a hive of activity, with banners advertising the latest in William Otive technology and crowds of professionals milling about. Ryan followed William through the entrance, trying not to gawk at the sprawling displays. Booths lined the hall, showcasing everything from high-tech diagnostic tools to luxury car prototypes that gleamed under the bright lights. "This way," William said, leading Ryan toward a large exhibit in the center of the hall. "There's someone I want you to meet." At the booth, a man in his 40s greeted them with a firm handshake. He had a sharp suit and an easy smile, exuding the confidence of someone who had built a successful career. "Ryan, this is Jonathan Hayes," William said. "He runs one of the most successful service centers in the state." Ryan hesitated before shaking Jonathan's hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." Jonathan's smile widened. "So, you're the apprentice William's been talking about. He says you've got a natural talent." Ryan flushed, unsure how to respond. "I'm still learning." Jonathan chuckled. "We're all still learning, kid. That's the secret to this industry. Always be curious, always be hungry. You've got a good mentor in William, so stick with it." William clapped Ryan on the shoulder. "Jonathan started just like you, Ryan. He worked his way up from sweeping floors to running his own business. There's a lot you can learn from him." Ryan glanced at Jonathan, a flicker of inspiration sparking in his chest. "How'd you do it?" he asked, his voice tentative. Jonathan leaned against the booth, his expression thoughtful. "Hard work, a lot of mistakes, and asking for help when I needed it. The key is to keep moving forward, no matter what." The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Ryan attended panels on William Otive technology, watched live demonstrations of diagnostic tools, and even tried his hand at a virtual repair simulator. Each new experience felt like a glimpse into a world he was just beginning to understand. By the afternoon, Ryan's nervousness had been replaced with excitement. He jotted down notes during presentations, asked questions during demonstrations, and soaked up every piece of advice he could. For the first time, he began to see a future for himself, a career he could be proud of, built on the skills he was learning. As they drove back to the dealership that evening, William glanced at Ryan, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. "You've been quiet," William said. "What's on your mind?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "It's a lot to take in. There's so much I didn't even know existed." William nodded. "That's a good thing. It means you're starting to see the possibilities." Ryan turned to look at him, his expression serious. "I think I know what I want to do. I want to build something, like you and Jonathan. I want to get good at this, not just for me, but for my mom, too. She's been through so much, and I want to give her a better life." William smiled, his approval clear. "That's a solid goal, Ryan. And with the work you've been putting in, I don't doubt you'll get there." Back at home, Ryan shared his experience at the conference with Mary. He recounted the panels, the conversations, and the ideas he'd been exposed to. Mary listened intently, her eyes softening as she saw the excitement and determination in her son's face. "You've really found something you're passionate about, haven't you?" she said. Ryan nodded. "Yeah, and I think I can actually make something of it, Mom." Mary reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I'm proud of you, Ryan. And maybe I was wrong about William. It seems like he really does want to help you." Ryan smiled, relief washing over him. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, Ryan's confidence continued to grow. He started setting long-term goals for himself, like mastering advanced repairs and eventually running his own garage. At the dealership, he approached every task with renewed focus, earning more respect from his coworkers, even Jason, whose teasing had become less frequent and more good-natured. At the technical school, Ryan's instructors began to notice his progress. One evening, after a particularly challenging hands-on test, Mr. Griffin pulled him aside. "You've got real potential, Ryan," the instructor said. "Keep this up, and you'll go far." Ryan nodded, his chest swelling with pride. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just chasing a dream. He was building it, one step at a time. Months passed, and the rhythm of Ryan's life became one of purpose and growth. Early mornings at the dealership turned into opportunities to learn, Afternoons at the technical school sharpened his skills, and evenings at home became moments to connect with his mom, Mary, in a way he hadn't been able to before. What had once been a cycle of struggle and survival was now a path of steady progress. The dealership had transformed from a place of uncertainty into a second home. Ryan had become a fixture in the garage, trusted by Hector and even respected by Jason, whose teasing had shifted into the occasional begrudging nod of approval. Cuz William Ayres began to ask for Ryan by name after witnessing his patience and precision with their vehicles. Each success brought Ryan closer to his goal of building a better life for himself and his mom. Ryan's journey wasn't without its challenges. Some days were grueling. Balancing school, work, and home left him exhausted, and the weight of responsibility sometimes felt too heavy to bear. But the lessons he learned along the way proved invaluable. Each time he faced an obstacle, he leaned into the skills he was developing: problem-solving, patience, and perseverance. One afternoon, while replacing a particularly tricky transmission part, Hector approached him with a rare smile. "You've got it, kid," he said, watching Ryan work with precision. "A year ago, I wouldn't have trusted you to clean the oil pan. Now, I'd put you on any job." The words filled Ryan with pride. He wasn't just an apprentice anymore. He was a trusted member of the team. His dedication had paid off, and the respect he'd worked so hard to earn now felt natural. At the technical school, Ryan excelled. He moved to the top of his class, earning praise from instructors who saw in him not just raw talent, but a hunger to learn and improve. One of his instructors, Mr. Griffin, even invited Ryan to assist in a weekend workshop, a rare honor that Ryan eagerly accepted. At home, Ryan's efforts began to show tangible results. His paychecks, combined with Mary's earnings from her job at the diner, allowed them to catch up on bills and even pay off the looming eviction notice that had haunted them for months. The stress that once weighed heavily on Mary's face began to fade, replaced by a quiet pride in her son's achievements. One evening, as Ryan handed her his latest paycheck, Mary looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You've done more for this family than I ever thought possible, Ryan," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." Ryan smiled, his heart swelling with love for the woman who had sacrificed so much for him. "You don't have to, Mom. We're in this together." One crisp fall morning, Ryan found himself sitting outside the dealership, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the sunlight glint off the rows of cars he had once felt unworthy to even touch. He thought back to where he had started, scrubbing tables at the diner, wearing duct-taped sneakers, and dreaming of a way out of the endless struggle. The boy he'd been felt like a distant memory. Ryan's journey hadn't just been about learning how to fix cars. It had been about discovering his own potential. He realized that every challenge he faced had shaped him, and every victory, no matter how small, had been a step toward building the life he wanted. The lessons he'd learned, from Hector's tough mentorship to William's unwavering belief in him, were ones he carried not just in his work, but in how he approached life itself. As Ryan reflected on his journey, he recognized that his story wasn't just about hard work. It was about the power of kindness and the ripple effects it could create. William Preston's decision to offer Ryan an opportunity had set off a chain of events that changed not only Ryan's life, but also Mary's. It reminded Ryan of the importance of paying it forward, of being the kind of person who helps others see their potential, just as William had done for him. This realization solidified Ryan's long-term goals. He didn't just want to be a great mechanic. He wanted to mentor others, to create opportunities for kids who came from backgrounds like his. He imagined opening his own garage one day, a place where talent and effort mattered more than experience or privilege. The story of Ryan's transformation wasn't one of instant success, but of steady, determined growth. He knew there would always be new challenges, harder repairs, tougher days, and unforeseen obstacles. But for the first time in his life, Ryan felt ready to face them. He had the tools, the support, and the vision to keep moving forward. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ryan stood, finishing his coffee and heading back to the garage. Hector was waiting with a new repair job, and Ryan couldn't wait to get his hands dirty. The path ahead was long, but Ryan welcomed it, knowing that every step would bring him closer to the future he was building, not just for himself, but for his family and the community he hoped to uplift. Ryan's story is a reminder that resilience, kindness, and a willingness to seize opportunities can transform lives. It shows the importance of mentorship, of believing in others even when they don't yet believe in themselves. It also highlights the value of hard work, not as an end in itself, but as a means to discover what you're truly capable of. For anyone facing their own struggles, Ryan's journey offers a powerful lesson. The road may be long and filled with obstacles, but every small step forward is progress. And sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one moment of someone believing in you, to change everything.